Don't look.
Can a tree be a witness to the past? Do its roots merely absorb water and minerals, or do they also absorb the tears, sighs, and unspoken secrets of people long buried in the soil? What if, by listening closely in the shade of a centuries-old tree, one could hear the whispers of people long lost to time? Would you dare to heed that call? Just imagine, you are alone in a secluded village. Night is deep, and a tomb-like silence envelops everything. Even the chirping of crickets seems to have ceased in fear today. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls a mournful tune. In front of you stands a massive, ancient banyan tree. Its aerial roots, like long fingers, seem to reach for the earth. The wind has completely died down. Not a single leaf stirs. But right next to your ear, it feels as if someone is trying to whisper something. You know there's no one there, yet it feels as if even the darkness has eyes. And those eyes, they are fixed intently on you. Is this feeling familiar to you? If not, perhaps it will be after you hear today's story. About 100 kilometers from the city lies a remote village called Chayabari. Almost everything about this village is like any other ordinary village, except for one thing. At the very edge of the village, where the crop fields merge with the horizon, stands alone a centuries-old banyan tree. People call it Sakshi Ban, the witness banyan. The village elders say that this tree is older than the village itself. Its thick trunk, in its many crevices, holds the history of countless generations. They believe that this Sakshi Ban is not merely a silent, standing plant. It is a mute observer of every event in this village: birth, death, love, betrayal. It sees everything and carefully hides those secrets deep within its roots. The hero of our story is Anirban, a city boy with a rational mind. He recently took a leave of absence and came to Chayabari village upon hearing about his grandfather's illness. During the day, he enjoys the peaceful village environment, but a strange uneasiness descends upon him at night, especially when he hears various miraculous stories about the Sakshi Ban from his grandfather or at the village tea stall. Some say that on moonless nights, shadow figures descend from the tree branches. Others swear they have heard crying sounds while passing under the tree. Anirban inwardly smiles at all this. To him, these are mere superstitions, nothing more than the imagination of uneducated villagers. One evening, while chatting with some village friends, the topic of Sakshi Ban came up. Anirban, with his characteristic disdain, said, "Do you actually believe these absurd stories? A tree that talks? Impossible."
One of his friends, Ratan, threw down a challenge. "Then, if you have the courage, spend tonight under that tree and see." None of us would even think of going that way after sunset. Anirban's rational mind was gripped by stubbornness. To dispel this baseless fear from the villagers' minds and to prove his own courage, he agreed. He thought it would be a great experience. He could read a book in the night's solitude, listen to the sounds of nature. What more could happen? Around 10 o'clock at night, Anirban set out with his preparations. He had a flashlight, a power bank, a water bottle, and a mystery novel by his favorite author. He had told his grandfather he was going to a friend's house. If he had told the truth, the old man would have been half dead with fear. It took him about 15 minutes to reach the Sakshi Ban. In the moonlight, the tree looked like a colossal giant. Its thousands of aerial roots plunged deep into the earth, as if gripping the world with 1,000 hands. Anirban sighed, found a clear spot under the tree, spread his sheet, and sat down. There was no sound other than the continuous chirping of crickets all around. The wind was quite cold. He opened his book and began to read, but for some reason, he just couldn't concentrate. He kept feeling as if someone was watching him from the darkness. He turned on his flashlight and looked around. He saw nothing but the movement of tree branches and leaves. "It's my imagination," Anirban told himself.
About an hour passed. Night was deepening. All the lights in the village had gone out. Now, only he and this ancient tree were awake. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound from the bushes behind him. Anirban's heart pounded. He almost jumped up and pointed his torch towards the source of the sound. His body was stiff with fear, his breath held. As he shone the light with trembling hands on the bushes, he saw a pair of green eyes staring back at him. His throat was dry with fear, but the next moment he saw it was a wildcat. Frightened by him, the animal ran and disappeared into the darkness. Anirban breathed a sigh of relief. He laughed at his own foolishness. He had been so scared of a mere wildcat. He sat back down in his spot, trying to compose himself. He thought that this fear itself was the real ghost. When people are alone or in the dark, they exaggerate small sounds and become afraid. This thought gave him some relief. He decided he wouldn't be afraid of anything else. It was almost 1 in the morning. Suddenly, everything became unusually still. The chirping of crickets had stopped. The wind was no longer blowing. Not a single leaf moved. This silence was not normal. It was like the moment before a storm. A cold shiver ran down Anirban's spine. And it was then that he heard the sound for the first time. A very faint whisper, almost like the sound of the wind. At first, he thought it might be the rustling of leaves, but the wind wasn't blowing. He pricked up his ears. The sound didn't seem to be coming from right beside his ear, but from beneath the ground.
It sounded as if many people were speaking in very low voices from a great depth. Anirban stood up. He turned on his torch and shone it on the ground at the base of the tree. There was nothing. But the whispering didn't stop. Instead, it slowly became clearer. He couldn't distinguish any individual words now, just a collective murmur. He felt as if the tree's roots were trembling. He bent down and put his ear to the ground. And what he heard made all the blood in his body run cold. It wasn't a murmur. They were human voices. Thousands of voices of women, men, and children mixed together. Some were crying, some screaming, some cursing others. The language was unintelligible, but the pain and despair in the voices were clear. Anirban recoiled. His rational mind screamed, "It's a hallucination." He was hearing these things due to extreme fatigue and fear. But his senses told a different story. He could clearly hear the crying from beneath the ground. He wanted to flee, but his feet felt stuck to the earth. At that very moment, the whispers began to take a specific form. Now, it wasn't thousands of voices, but one or two distinct voices could be understood. A girl's crying voice saying, "Don't leave me, take me with you." Immediately after, a harsh male voice saying, "Traitor, I will soak this earth with your blood." Anirban realized these were not ordinary sounds. These were memories. The memories of what this tree's roots had seen and heard over the years were seemingly speaking tonight. The girl who had committed suicide here while waiting for her lover. The landlord whom his loyal servant had murdered and buried here. These were their last words, their last feelings. His fear was no longer physical. It was penetrating deep into his mind. He realized this tree was not just a witness. It was a prison. Countless unfulfilled souls were trapped in its root network. Suddenly, all sounds stopped. Again, that graveyard silence. Anirban thought maybe it was all over. Maybe it was just his imagination. But the next moment was the most terrifying. A little child's voice, absolutely clear, whispered right by his ear. "Run, they are coming." Anirban's heart seemed to stop for a moment and then started again. Who was coming? Why was this innocent voice warning him? His entire body felt numb. He couldn't move, nor could he run. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because the most terrifying part is yet to come. Who are they? Anirban's voice wouldn't come out. He frantically looked around. And that's when the change began. The wind that had been still all this time suddenly began to blow. But this wind was not cold. It was a stifling warmth. And mixed with that wind was an intense smell. a strong, foul odor like rotting flesh mixed with the damp smell of wet earth. Anirban felt nauseous.
The tree's leaves were no longer swaying naturally. They were trembling, as if the tree itself was writhing in intense agony. Anirban saw that the tree's massive aerial roots, which had been still until then, seemed to have come alive. They were slithering slightly over the ground like snakes. This could not be an illusion. Suddenly, he felt the ground he was standing on trembling slightly, and beneath his feet, through the blanket, he felt something ice-cold touch his leg. He screamed in fear and shone his flashlight downwards. What he saw, he was not prepared for. A pale, dry, finger-like object had emerged from the ground. It wasn't a finger, but the tip of a dead tree root. But it looked exactly like a human finger. And it wasn't alone. All around him, hundreds of such root tips were emerging, tearing through the earth's surface as if the dead beneath the soil were trying to touch the world above with their fingers. The whispering sound had returned, but this time it wasn't indistinct. Now thousands of voices were screaming simultaneously, a collective shriek that pierced his ears and tore his brain apart. Anirban clutched his ears with both hands, but the sound seemed to be coming from inside his own head. He saw faint, shadowy figures swaying among the tree branches and between the aerial roots in the moonlight, as if hundreds of people were hanging together by their necks. They had no faces, just dark outlines. All of them were staring at him. He felt an ice-cold touch on his neck. Someone seemed to be standing behind him. The smell of rotting leaves accompanied their breath. Anirban couldn't muster the courage to turn his head. He knew that if he looked back, what he would see would make it impossible for him to remain sane. It felt to him as if the tree roots no longer wanted to stay underground. They wanted to rise to the surface. They only wanted Anirban. They wanted a new listener for all their accumulated stories, their pain, their rage. A new witness. Anirban realized that if he stayed here for another moment, the tree's roots would drag him too into the depths of the earth. He too would become another whisper, another untold story. This realization gave him the last ounce of strength to survive. With all his might, he broke free in a single jerk. He left his book, flashlight, blanket, everything there and ran. Not towards the village, but simply into the darkness, wherever his eyes led him. Behind him chased the collective shriek of thousands of souls and that rotting, sweet smell. He
He felt as if the tree roots were slithering like snakes, grabbing at the earth, rushing to catch him. The next morning, the villagers found Anirban unconscious in the crop field. His body was covered in thorn scratches, and he was trembling with a high fever. When he was brought home, he kept babbling the same phrase over and over like a delirium. "They speak. The roots speak." The village doctor said it was due to fear and cold, but Anirban knew what he had seen, what he had heard. A few days later, when his fever subsided, he packed his bag without a word and left for the city. Neither his grandfather nor anyone else from the village could stop him. His gaze was vacant, as if he had left his soul beneath that witnessing banyan tree. Even after returning to the city, Anirban was never the same. He feared the night. He feared silence. At night, when everything goes quiet, he can still hear it. Very faint, yet clear. He feels that the whispering emanates from the corners of his flat, from inside the walls, and even from the sound of his own breath. That banyan tree might have released him physically, but its roots had embedded themselves deep within Anirban's soul. He is now not just a listener. He himself has become a part of that forever. How did you like the story? If you enjoyed this presentation of ours, please encourage us with a like and share the story with your friends and family who love listening to horror stories. Now, a question for you. Do you know of any haunted tree or place in your village or area that has a hidden story behind it? Do share your experience or the story you've heard in our comments section. We love reading your comments. We'll meet again with a new fear, a new mystery. Until then, stay safe. Good night.